Your new Wednesday addiction. Humpin' It with Mello, D83, and the Maestro.
Hello and welcome everyone. The week is almost over. You're halfway there. It's Wednesday, hump day, and you're now humping it with Mello, D83, and the Maestro. Please get your mind out of the gutter.
If you like tea, Earl Grey, hot, then this is the podcast for you. Make it so, number one. Good evening and welcome, podcast fam. Thank you for joining us tonight. Don't look like that.
Something's in my eye.
So, I'm not gonna lie, I'm lost on that.
It was a Star Trek reference.
Yeah.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Oh,
Yes. He used to.
I'm not lost anymore. But I want to be.
Oh man.
Oh my God.
Cold-blooded.
So, how are my co-hosts doing tonight? D83, Maestro.
Lovely. I'm doing just
Doing well,
peachy.
tired. But that seems to be the norm.
Yeah. It's this whole adulting thing. You know. That's just what it is.
Yes. I agree.
Highly, highly overrated.
I second that motion.
Don't recommend it for anyone.
So this evening's discussion, dating. How soon till you jump the broom? Well, let's get into it. So,
Never. That's for my daughter. Never.
Great day in the morning.
Never. Absolutely never. Never right. Never right time.
oh,
Man, it's tough out
that's yes. I have no words. But on average, I guess, and it doesn't have to be personal experience, but what would you say is a good time frame to date before you get married and then vice versa? Or date until you get engaged, and then how long should you be engaged until you get married?
I'm thinking, dating and engaged combined. 3-4 years. 3-4 years. Been married. I definitely feel as though you have to live together as well for a good amount of time before you get married. It's just to make sure that the two people can live together.
Cohabitate
Yeah.
peacefully?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends. Because I don't think there's one set answer. I think it varies. Number one, it depends on the people in their relationship. Because, encompassing all, sometimes you can date and marriage really shouldn't be in the picture, right? Because the relationship ain't what it should be, right? But you still push for marriage anyways, right? So that's one option. So there needs to be some serious evaluation, right? And some serious conversation around marriage. Marriage, the topic of marriage shouldn't be something you do once you're married. You feel me?
Yeah.
It needs to happen early on. It needs you both should have conversations and understandings of each other's viewpoints, what marriage looks like to each of y'all. Because it can be very different.
Yes.
There can be expectations on one side that the other person has no clue of, right? There could be nuances that, there's multiple topics to talk about when it comes to marriage. Specifically when it comes to age, though, I think there's a difference. I think the younger you are, it's fair to give a bit more time, right? Before, when you're in the dating scene, before you actually, start having these conversations about marriage. Because number one, the life experience and the relationship experience is not there yet, right?
Right.
So you can easily feel like that person is the one, but your experience is so limited, and that's not a knock, right? That's just the reality of it.
Life.
Yeah. That you could be making a decision that you don't have the correct information for,
Yeah.
So
Like, how do you base your feeling of this is the one against what,
2 3 relationships, like, real
right.
talk. And, does the first one really count? It can, obviously, but we're talking, puppy love almost at that point. You feel me? Because that, especially being your first, and, all the feels are there, and what you really, think you feel, but, it's just new, so I definitely think age has a lot to do with that answer, right? The answer is going to be different, right? I do think the older you are, right? So let's just say for our, 30s and 40s, even 30s maybe, it should be shorter. But I think the older you get, that time can decrease. Number one, because you have experience at this point, right? You should. Number two, hopefully you're more self-aware of what it is that you really want out of a relationship and what you're looking for in a partner. Hopefully that has become more defined, right? So the choice hopefully becomes a lot easier, so you can, and I think also your vetting skills become much better at that point in time too, right?
Yes.
You don't have to, you won't entertain but so much from somebody before you cut them loose, right? I think that's an important aspect of just, relationship experience and wisdom. So
That and getting older, your tolerance for people.
yes, that was
less and less. Hard day at work.
That was my thought. I was trying to make it sound pretty. But
You did a good job.
the fact is, you're tired, so
Yeah.
you don't have time to deal with people's nonsense, right? So,
Or even not nonsense, but just the fact of maybe seeing if, I can make this work, or we can, see where this goes. You're like at a point where it's like, I don't have the time, the energy,
Capacity.
the bandwidth, to even entertain this.
right,
Let's just have somebody already on that level and move from there.
right.
So
right,
I think that's a good point. Age is a big factor. I also think, as you had alluded to, just sometimes the people. Sometimes you can have people that are more mature for their age and that are really aligned in what their core values are and what they're looking for. And I think, that would also be something to take into consideration, because if y'all are just like on the same page, like where you want this to go, the way you see to get there is very similar or the same, then you don't need, I think, that amount of time. I would also add that you would like to get past the fuzzy feeling, or as we would call the honeymoon stage.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it's always smiles and Hallmark cards, seemingly.
Don't be stealing my
you'll
line.
have yours.
Don't steal my line.
What?
I stole that
You
from
didn't
somebody
trademark
else.
that.
I
You
stole it
didn't
from
trademark it.
You're right. I stole it from somebody else, but you can't use it.
But at the same time, you want to get past that feel good stage to where you're not just letting things go. You're seeing things for what they are, and you're actually getting a good look at the person, their habits, their mannerisms, all of these things that if you're not careful and you're like, oh, this is okay, you start hating these little things in the future.
Right.
Like
Yes.
just the way they put lotion on, or the way they may chew their food, or it's
How
like
you do that wrong? How you do that wrong?
Hey, listen. Hey, that's real talk, though. That's real talk, because it's funny. We laugh at it, right? Because it seems so trivial and ridiculous, but that's true. It happens, and usually that's a result of not being aligned, right, on other things, right? So in those gaps, really start to build animosity. You start to build animosity, right? So now everything that person does triggers you, You know,
It just rubs you the wrong way.
yeah, you know, that's facts though. That happens, man. That's crazy.
Well, you definitely need to live together for a good amount of time prior to getting married. Because marriage, in my opinion, is supposed to be the one and done.
Right.
That's the only person for you, only person for them, and it's supposed to be forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think though,
depending on your age, could be a very long time.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Hopefully.
I do think though, to give some grace in that area, that sometimes we if we do it without all the information, we do it. Our heart's in the right place, but we don't fully understand what it takes to be in a marriage. We fully understand what it's going to take to keep it together. And it doesn't work out. I think it's okay, right? Because it's a learning experience. It's a hard lesson, right? But we've learned. So the key to that would be making sure that you do learn the lessons. Next time you understand more about yourself and about the partner that you want, and reflect on the marriage. Okay, what things did I do right? What things that I didn't do correctly? I couldn't speak. And and I agree. I'm on the train of one and done. Right. That's really my philosophy. I want to do it once. I don't want to do it again. So I think sometimes I can be ultra cautious, right? And sometimes I can, overanalyze or be, I guess, overly cautious is probably the best term. For at least for now, that's the best one I come up with. And taking the time to making sure. But I think the most important thing is kind of what V, our guest last episode, said, is making sure you have a checklist, right, of the things that are hard no's, the things you can compromise on, and the things that won't necessarily bother you. Have that that comprehensive list. And does this person fit into that? Right. So while I say, yes, it's one and done. That's my goal. I understand that's not knocking anybody out there. Right. Because I do understand that sometimes we make the choices with a good heart, but yet it wasn't the best decision for us at the time. So maybe getting married again, once you've assessed everything and, evaluated and, had a chance in retrospect to look back, and you're better, you're wiser. So, you can make a better choice. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being overly cautious at all. I mean, when you're looking for, again, the end all, the one, the soulmate,
right.
Again, if you're looking for someone one and done, then I think you need to spend an extended period of time, looking for that person and examining each, person that you at the time are, talking to. I don't think anything's wrong with that at all. I kind of wish that I would have done that then.
Right. I hear you.
No.
I hear you.
But I think that kind of falls back into the age thing. When you're young and you don't have that experience, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've always been told that once you know better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have been able to amass that information, you can actually use it to help you make better decisions, because now you have an idea of what not going to work for you, what you won't tolerate, what you really do want. And sometimes, again, as I think I mentioned last week, sometimes what you think you want isn't really what you want once you get it. So once you've kind of been through that, you can kind of, have a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No question, man. No question.
But now that I do know, doesn't mean I want to do it again.
And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all, man. That's happened to a lot of people, who've kind of, been through the whole marriage thing. And, it didn't work out, and they realized over time that, it's just not for me. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no law out there that says you have to be married, right?
Right.
It's okay, I think, though, it needs to obviously, if you enter back into the, not you necessarily, but you can be included in this conversation, right? If you get back out into the dating world, that intention needs to be known up front, right? That's something you would have to, communicate up front. Hey, listen, I'm not looking for marriage, right? That's not one of the things that I'm looking for at this point in time. What I am looking for is, a companionship, somebody that, exclusivity, if that's what you're looking for. But marriage is not going to be high on that totem pole. So
Right.
if we enter into this relationship, you have to be okay with that. It can't be a conversation of, hey, you know what, we're together 2 years. When are we getting married? Listen, we had this conversation.
Yeah.
You got to be upfront.
Yeah,
Upfront
absolutely.
with the first two, so that you don't lead them on thinking
Exactly.
Right.
I'm looking for marriage.
Yeah.
Wrong.
But that's with everything, be upfront about
Yeah.
it. So
Now, that whole, I said, living with someone, for a while, getting to know the things that you like about them and your dislikes, getting to know each other better. Do you think it's okay to live with someone for, I don't know, years, let's just say, and never getting married? I mean, how do y'all look at that? If someone's living together, the acting as married but not really.
shacking
They
up.
don't have the.
That's what they
don't have
call
the
that.
title.
They shacking up,
They don't have the title
Yeah.
per se. I mean, how do y'all
Right.
look at that?
I think it depends on the people, the relationship, right? Was that something that was discussed in the beginning, right? That, hey, we're not really, neither one of y'all are really looking for marriage, but y'all enjoy each other's company and you're exclusive, right? I mean, if that's discussed up front, and everybody's on board with that, each party, then, that's your decision, who am I to judge on that, I think the problem comes in is when it's not discussed, right? In a relationship that is exclusive and is progressing, and one person has the idea, the other person doesn't, or isn't feeling the same way. That's when it becomes an issue, right? Because now the other person who wants to get married is going to have a bunch of questions. Wow, why not? I thought, we win this thing. And again, if it's not discussed, there's expectations, right? That are not going to be met, right? Because they weren't communicated. And there's, again, animosity that's going to build up in that, right? So, quick answer for me, if it's discussed up front, that's what y'all have decided on, hey, do your thing, right? But if it hasn't been discussed, that's going to be a problem at some point in time.
I think, though, even if it has been discussed, I think over time, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, especially for a female, I could see where the female may go, he likes me, but he don't really love me. I don't have the title. I don't,
Right.
not his wife. I don't.
I mean,
What is he scared of? What is he scared of? I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
and that's fair, right? I think that's fair, right? But that needs to be communicated from her, right? Hey, listen, I know we talked about this in the beginning, but I'm starting to feel different about this. I'm starting to want that title. I'm starting to want to be, a wife. So where you at with it? If you're still the same, then this may not work for us anymore. And it's okay because people do change over time. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you can communicate that and y'all can, have a discussion. So,
Yeah, I think two things with that. One, if you have that conversation, be prepared to possibly be single. And a lot of times women, they're having this conversation to feel like they're pushing this into like the guy's orbit to maybe make him reevaluate when he might already be set where he is. And she's not okay with walking away and she wants to keep pushing. That can also be a problem, and vice versa. It can happen with guys too, because I have heard of that happening, believe it or not. And then secondly, with the cohabitation in general, I have a couple of quick points and a little bit of statistics on that. I think it depends on who you are, because religiously, some people don't believe in doing that until they are actually married, which is completely fine. Those that don't necessarily see things through the religious standpoint are okay with doing that. And from the Pew Research Center, which is pewresearch.org, a,
Sorry.
a larger share of adults do cohabitate before they're married, and it's becoming more accepted. Now, there are some reasons as to why people are cohabitating more or longer before they get married. One issue is financially. They don't see themselves financially ready to make that jump into marriage. Secondly, they don't feel like they've amassed the things that they think that they should have in order to get married, whether it's not financially, but maybe having the right job, maybe having, or like being in the right space, the right type of house or environment, the right state, city, what have you. And so they choose to cohabitate. Most of the time it's with the intentions of getting married, but they're not doing it right away. And most Americans, about 69%, say cohabitation is acceptable, which is a large jump from what it has been in the past, because things have changed, as we have mentioned. I think, over several podcasts, but definitely last week, how the dynamics have changed between men and women, and the reason why marriage is possibly different from what it once used to be. So my personal feelings, I think at some point cohabitation might be necessary at first, because you do kind of want to get a feeling of what it's like to be in a marriage with this person. Because you might get along great just seeing each other here and there. And then once you get married, it's like, I'm seeing too much of this person. I can't do this. They live like pigs. I cannot possibly live like this. So there are nuances that you might not see just dating and being in opposite domains, and if you were together in the same domain.
Yeah. I think for a majority of time, I've always thought this similar, right? I've always thought kind of, hey, if I'm in a long-term committed relationship, at some point I'm going to need to, cohabitate to see kind of, but I think being in my current relationship, it's kind of changed that a little bit. I'm still kind of, floating around, but because if you spend enough time together, right? If you're, obviously over each other's houses, things like that, at times it's not always going to be planned, right? So you do get a glimpse of seeing that person in the open. You feel me? Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's cool. You know what I'm saying? So you get that glimpse. So I don't think it's necessary for all scenarios. You feel me? Like cohabitating. I think you can get a good snapshot, but I also think that it can become comfortable to just cohabitate. And I think that's a challenge. I think that's going to be, you have to kind of watch that, because it can, you can get used to just cohabitating, and then the relationship kind of doesn't move forward anymore, especially if that's something you all have talked about, moving forward and getting married. You can do that. So I just, just some caution there, right? Not knocking it either way, right? Whether you do or don't, you know what I'm saying? But there's, just some caution there. And doing some research too. One of the things that a lot of relationship professionals recommend is not necessarily cohabitation, but going on an extended trip or vacation with your significant other, where you have to spend time, a significant amount of time in close proximity, right? Because that can also give you some clues on how this person is, right? How do they live? How they move? Just kind of get all those nuances, right? And if there is something that bothers you, so it's a conversation, right? Always, it should be a conversation, right? Don't hold it in, don't internalize it. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about it. You feel me? But the other thing is, they recommend is to have a disagreement, right? There should be a disagreement that's had between before you actually make the decision for marriage, because you need to see how that person handles disharmony. How do they resolve conflict? When there is a discord between you. So and that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because you can say all day, what happens, what do you do when you get mad? That's a great question. And in your head, you can be like, oh, I act like this, I'm cool, I'm chill. But that's your perspective, right? So
Exactly.
your actions could be something totally different, but in your head, you're thinking you're cool, so
Yes.
like not necessarily, giving that answer to be dishonest, but it's a bias on that perspective, because
Right.
it's your perspective. So
Right.
I thought that was some good advice, which begs the question is, if you don't have a disagreement, what happens when you don't have an argument or something, I think there's going to be, over the course of the relationship, something that you don't agree on. It doesn't have to be an argument, right? But how do you resolve that conflict? How do y'all kind of come to terms or compromise on something that's, that you don't see eye to eye on necessarily? So, I think that's good advice.
I think
forget
that's
where-
very important.
I forget where I get
Absolutely.
that from. I should have wrote that down. So, I'm sorry for not giving credit. Sorry.
It's all good. But yeah, I think that is very important, because not only in conflict with yourselves, but if you're going to get married and have children, you have to remember children are going to be looking at the two of you and seeing how you resolve conflict. And this sets the template for them and how they will
Handle situation.
resolve
Yeah.
conflict.
Absolutely.
And it's very important that it's not about seeing eye to eye all the time, but being able to respect each other and not having to agree on everything, but respecting each other enough
Right.
to say, hey, we can agree to disagree.
Right.
And take it from there. But I think that's so important, because you hear and I've known situations where couples argue and argue and argue, and kids are seeing this argument, and there's anxiety and depression, and you wonder where it comes from, because it's just like a constant storm in the household if two people can't agree and they don't know how to resolve what's wrong.
That
Yeah.
also distorts the image of what a relationship should be to them,
Absolutely.
right? And that creates a problem, a really big problem as they get older, right?
Right.
If they don't have a good example at home, they have what they have, right? So I think that's an important piece to it, and a lot of times we don't think about that, because we're in the midst of going through, whatever issues we're going through, and emotions are flaring. But it's always, if you got kids in the house, that's vitally important, because you are teaching them, So
And you don't want
I
them
don't
to
know.
repeat the cycle of
Yeah.
finding somebody who they have that same volatile interaction with.
Right.
And then it just
oddly,
keeps, yeah.
because oddly enough, that does happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've known someone really, really, really well within my family that her mother, was beaten and married an alcoholic, and her path was the same. Every single person she ever dealt with
Yeah.
was an alcoholic and was beating her until she ended up committing suicide.
Oh man.
This
I'm so
this
sorry.
is
Yeah.
no. I mean, it is, unfortunately, it is what it is. But it's just oddly enough, that's how things happen.
Yeah. especially
but I
being
also
young,
say that,
though.
yeah. But then, my parents' relationship, they didn't have, I mean, they've been married for, Lord, 31, so 36 years now, 37 years.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And they haven't had the best marriage. However, I can honestly say I cannot recall one time them having an argument in front of us.
And that's great.
I don't ever remember them arguing.
Yeah.
I
And that's
don't
good,
ever
man.
remember seeing them argue in front of us.
I think for the majority, that's good, right? Especially if those arguments,
Yeah.
if it's hard to kind of control your emotions in those arguments, right? It's good for for children not to see it. On the flip side, though, I think there is importance in children seeing their parents have a disagreement and resolve it. You feel what I'm saying? Because that teaches them that skill. They have that example. That, okay, well, I see mom and dad. They were mad at each other, but now they okay. They made up. You know what I'm saying? So it sets that standard for them. Listen, I know that's going to happen to me at some point. I got to make up with them. You know what I'm saying? So, but no, I think that's great, man. That's great because, yeah, I remember sometimes my parents, they was getting it in. You know what I'm saying? Getting it in, and the most, and that happens. Most of us have seen it. For the,
Yeah.
I think for the most part. So, or a lot of us. I won't say most, but
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's just what it is. So, real quick to kind of go back to our topic. When is it? What's I can't remember. How long? I can't remember the topic. Anyways, how soon before you jump the broom? Okay, thank you. It took me a second. Thank you. Going back to kind of what I said again, but I think I've done a little research and I want to throw some statistics in there. So from the website Motivated to Marry with Amy Schoen, I probably pronounced her last name wrong, forgive me. She is a dating coach, right? And she's been doing that for some time. She also agrees with different time spans for different age groups. For obvious reasons, kind of like we stated before. So she thinks a year to 2 years, maybe more, depending on the people and the circumstances, right? These are recommendations. These are not hard set lines.
Right.
But for 20-somethings, a year to 2 years, give or take. So 30-somethings can be around that same because there's still some newness. There's still some inexperience. But this was to me, I won't say surprising, but a little eye-opening, right? So she says for couples 40 and over, she recommends no more than 6 months of dating. And I was like, wow. Like, we're talking 6 months. But again, going back to kind of what I said earlier, you're at that mature point, right? So where you've had relationship experience, life experience. You've been through bad situations, right? Because you have to go through the bad to understand the good, right? So you have your repertoire is kind of filled up. You know what I'm saying? You have that experience.
You're seasoned.
Yeah, so you can make those discerning decisions a lot better, hopefully, right? So when I thought about it, that makes sense. Again, these are not hard set lines, right? These are just recommendations because it does depend on the scenarios, right? Because, one of the scenarios you gave was there was like a 7-year difference between them. One was like 42 and that was like 49. And, they took a little bit longer than the 6 months. They took like a year and a half because they both agreed that didn't want to have kids anymore, right? And there was some kind of other family matters going on. So, they both agreed, hey, we can take our time to do this. We know this is where we want to be, where we're going, but we don't have to do it right now, right? And then another couple that were closer in age, they hit the marks. 6 months, they were engaged. At a year, they were married. So, it really does vary based on that. I think another caveat to throw in there, too, was blended families, right? When both people have kids, that can be a challenging scenario sometimes, too, right? So, I think I think those are good guidelines, good recommendations, obviously. And again, it just depends on the people and the situation, and all the dynamics that kind of fit into it. So, I thought it was kind of dope.
Yeah, I could see where that would actually make things a lot more challenging.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's that?
Bringing in kids into the
Mm-hmm.
whole mix.
Yeah, because then you also have, it depends on how the other kids' parents are, right?
Yeah.
And like how that whole situation went down, and it was how was that relationship? How were you with them, right? How's that relationship, right? So that makes a huge difference. So.
Yeah, because they got a co-parent. Plus, how are the kids gonna react to the other kids?
Yeah.
It's a lot of different dynamics you have to take into consideration.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So I mean, again, I think ultimately, it's good. What this is all saying, I think, is you need to have a plan, right? Number one, you need to ask the hard questions, right? You need to have get the information up front, right? Do you want to have kids? What does marriage look like to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What are the things that I need to do for you, to make sure that you're happy? All of that stuff. And one of the biggest questions is your partner ready? Are you ready to pursue this? Pursue a relationship that's into marriage, right? That's the intention, right? Intentional dating. Are you ready for this? With the end goal of being married. Those are the important questions you have to ask up front, and get the honest answers, right?
Yeah.
And then, having those discussions up front, you can kind of, you have the answers. You can kind of see, is your partner really, are their actions following through on, what they said? So,
yeah,
that's my.
I like. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe last week's episode with Alley Cat, what he had mentioned about looking for a significant other. He said he was going to wait until after his kids became a certain age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he did not want to take time away from his kids, and I really respect that.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Personally respected that a lot.
Yeah, and that's amazing because it shows self-awareness. It shows a lot of depth. I'm saying that he's fully aware of what he's got on his plate. And prioritizing. So that's amazing.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing. So, but
I think this has been just really great because I don't think sometimes people think about it in this aspect. Is there a right or wrong answer? Are you rushing into something too quickly? But I think always the bottom line is communicate, but also know yourself well enough to know what you want before you can communicate that.
Right.
Yes. So this has, been really a good conversation. I think all of our conversations could use a part 2, but maybe we'll touch on it again at a different date.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll bring some guests back too.
Absolutely. So again, co-hosts, thank you so much as always. And our podcast fam, we're always appreciative of you tuning in to us. Please, if you have any comments, any suggestions, don't forget to like and subscribe, but also leave some info, some input on our our YouTube page. We don't have Facebook.
Not
YouTube
yet.
page.
That's coming.
But thank you again for joining us. And until next week, have a good evening. Peace out.
Peace.